we're looking at a meds review, among other things, to try and address that. But when those meltdowns happen, I guess the best way I could describe it is to say that Cliff doesn't have some of the normal self-restraint mechanisms that the rest of us have. His fight or flight reflex, as it's called, well, to quote Spinal Tap, it goes to 11, and he can't rein it back in. This isn't a tantrum in the sense that tantrums are goal-oriented. It's something that a small child would have in the store when they don't get the candy that they want. If you were to give them the candy, things would return to normal. They would stop screaming, but of course you don't do that because they need to learn the self-restraint. With an autism meltdown, it's not goal-oriented. It's that Cliff's entire world around him has become utterly overwhelming. He's not able to express it to me. I sense from being with him through these things, he experiences an entire range of emotions: anger, panic, fear about what the outcome might be. But all of these are just so intense that he can't handle it. And so one of two things happens. Either he runs, and he runs as fast and as far as he possibly can. We've had the police on scene. I think we're up to 8 times now to try and find him with search and rescue. He's been rescued once by one of the canine sniffer dogs, and that's the times that the police have been involved, not including the times that we've just managed to figure out quick enough which direction he went and reel him back in. But if it's not the flight response, then it's the fight response, and that's simply raw aggression. He lashes out at people or things, and it's indiscriminate. It doesn't matter in a circumstance that, well, for example, when he lost his sunglasses, he simply couldn't handle it. And when his mom tried to restrain him, she was then the closest thing, and he began hitting her. The other problem lately is Cliff is growing very, very fast. He turned 13 a month ago. He stands a little over 5'6", and he weighs 180 pounds, which gives me about 20 pounds and perhaps 3 inches on him. That's not much of an advantage for a kid who is nothing but autism and adrenaline. The worst of it is that the first thing to go, one of the greatest challenges with autism is communication. And so when his anxieties get the better of him, the communication is the first thing to go. I honestly don't know, when we're talking to him in the middle of a meltdown, I honestly don't know whether he can hear us. He certainly isn't able to respond to us or give us any indication that he understands us. It's not that we stop trying to reach him verbally, but I've never believed that it's really a good way to approach things. Usually calm and quiet is it, but when he's having an outburst in a shopping mall the way that he did with his mom that day, you do whatever you're able. If you don't explain it to people, if you don't share it with them, they won't understand. They won't come to accept it, and they won't understand how important help is. When we describe the experience that we've had at more than a couple of hospitals, on those times when Cliff's had to be taken somewhere, Um, I mean, it's shocking to people that, I mean, the default reaction seems to be sedate him, restrain him, and keep him in the locked room until he comes back to normal. And then going forward on a discharge plan, there's usually a couple of referrals to, community service agencies that, not surprisingly, have a waiting list.
Let me ask you this. You allude to the fact that your wife was assaulted by your son, Cliff, during one of his meltdowns. You have recently been, I guess, overpowered was the term that I read referencing this by Cliff during an outburst. How fearful are you and your wife of what your son can do to both of you if he's in one of these states?
Very. These last few experiences, I think, have made it quite clear my wife is not able to handle him any longer. He is pretty much as tall as she is. She just can't. What's really more frightening than what he does to us, I'm very fearful for our daughter, who is a little over 2 years younger than Cliff. We've talked a lot about the violent episodes, and I really need to pull back from that for a moment and just make a couple of things clear to put it in perspective. The first one is that not everyone with autism is aggressive. It's not an automatic follow-on behavior. I know an awful lot of kids with autism because of our work in the Autism Coalition, and I'd have to say it's actually a small minority that become aggressive to the point that my son does. And that's important to remember. People with autism should not be feared. They can be often very difficult to understand, but for heaven's sake, don't be afraid. The other part of it is that even for Cliff, it's an irrational outburst. It is not, it isn't just a loss of temper. He feels very, very badly after these things happen. Regret and remorse, absolutely yes. He's very frustrated about the fact that he can't control himself, no matter how hard he tries. And he cries that he's done these things. He sees the holes in the wall and the stuff that gets broken, and he knows what he's done, and he hates it. He's very aware of his differences, and he doesn't like them. And that is just another source of frustration and anxiety for the poor kid. And it's another reason why we really, really want to get him the kind of help that he needs.
You mentioned that your wife basically has said that she cannot handle your son anymore. Where are you on that?
Very near that point. At the moment, quite incapable. I'm diabetic, and I have a rather bad infection in my left hand that's been getting IV antibiotics. I have a portable little gizmo on my belt that is delivering this medication, and I have an IV inserted in my right arm, and I'm just in no condition to physically engage with Cliff. So at the moment, thanks to some emergency funding, we have a worker here at all times when, except for that first thing in the morning for that 30 minutes before school. And that has only ever once been a problem time. Mostly it takes a little bit more of a day for Cliff to get wound up, if he's going to get wound up. But this fellow is here from the time Cliff gets home to school until he goes to bed at night, and on weekends, 12 hours a day. And that's a considerable expense. I mean, as beneficial as that has been to our stress level, and it's meant that we can actually get a little bit of rest and regroup somewhat. It's not of any sort of therapeutic or teaching value to it. It's monitoring Cliff and just making sure that nothing bad happens, but it's not really doing anything to improve his condition.
So
and
then
that's where we need to go next.
Well, what is the ideal situation or solution for you and your family?
Well, what we're trying to find right now is a residential setting where Cliff can go to meet three primary goals. The first of which is the meds review. There is one medication that we want to see eliminated. We've been working towards that for well over a year. It's caused a great deal of unnecessary weight gain. Cliff doesn't need about 30 of those 180 pounds. He'd be much healthier without it. But we're absolutely not prepared here to start reducing anything, knowing that that's just playing with fire. So that's the first requirement. The second is to build a better behavioral plan for him. The school has been they've been deeply involved with his behavioral work just in the school setting. He's older now. He's more aware. He's grown and developed to a point where we now need to revisit some of those things and in an organized way do things differently. And that takes a surprising amount of work. That means in the home setting that not only Mom and I have to be following the same protocols, if you will, decision trees, and responding to him in the same way, making requests, task demands of him in the same language, but so do all of the others that work with him and come through the house. And that's a bit of a tall order, getting everybody sort of on the same track. But the last thing, and I've been pushing very hard for this, is some counseling directly for Cliff. I think he's at an age, and I think he's at a developmental stage where he needs to be helped with coping with being different. And as much as his mom and I try, and I love my boy dearly, I don't feel I've got the skills to do that to the level that he needs. He needs a professional to guide him and help him understand and cope with these things.
Bruce, what worries you the most?
What's going to happen when we're old and what's going to happen after we're gone scares the hell out of me. There are nights that I can't sleep